Hey guys, Mike here, the Detroit Borg with a look at the OnePlus 7T, the follow-up to the OnePlus 6T. So at $599, this slots below the OnePlus 7 Pro, but gets pretty close to the OnePlus 7 Pro in terms of features. So that includes a new triple camera design, a new fluid AMOLED display with a 90Hz refresh rate, and faster performance thanks to the Snapdragon 855 CPU. But we get even faster warp charging, and it launches with Android 10 right out of the gate. Of course, there's a lot more to talk about, but first let's get to the unboxing, and it's a pretty impressive presentation. So OnePlus sent this press kit to me so I could take an early look at the 7T, and it comes with a lot of extras. So of course, when you buy yours, you won't get this big box full of goodies. So the first thing I see when I open up this butterfly-style box is the reviewer's guide. A pretty impressive looking piece of literature, and certainly a nice collectible if you're a fan of OnePlus. This tells me all the details I need to know about the new phone with some nice graphics. They've also included a OnePlus branded microfiber cleaning cloth in that OnePlus red color. Next up is the extra long box for the OnePlus 7T. This is the retail box. This is what you'll get when you buy yours, not this whole set. Before we unbox that, let's get to the rest of these accessories. So they did include a set of wireless earphones. These are the OnePlus Bullet Wireless 2 headphones, which I took a look at in my 7 Pro video. So these are only $99. They're in-ear style headphones with an inline remote and microphone. They're magnetic. It's a pretty slick design. Takes only about 10 minutes to get a full day's charge. They've also included a OnePlus notebook with the Never Settle branding embossed on the top. This is a really thoughtful thing to throw in for reviewers that might want to take some notes while reviewing the phone. And lastly, they've included a set of some optional cases you can buy for the OnePlus 7T. So that includes some familiar styles like the sandstone protective case. So if you remember the original OnePlus, it had that sandstone texture on the back, which I really liked. So if you want to add it, you can with this case. We also have the carbon protective case if you want something a little more robust, or something a little more minimal with the silicone bumper case in red. So moving on to the extra long box for the OnePlus 7T, one thing that's always unique about OnePlus is that they like to emphasize the people that are responsible for making these devices and the community that helps to support them. So you'll see messages throughout the packaging that references that. So lifting our skinny lid, the first thing we get is some paperwork. So once we slide that out, we'll see a set of OnePlus stickers. Each time some of these stickers are a little different depending on what they want to focus on. We also get a two-sided quick start guide in multiple languages, and if you look at the back, you'll see reference to the new triple camera system. Also inside is this invite. So if you open this up, you'll get a message from the CEO and founder of OnePlus. So if you want to read that, go ahead and pause your screen. So moving on to the phone and its accessories, we have the Never Settle branding just below the phone wrapped in plastic. So the color I got is Glacier Blue, but this is also available in Frosted Silver. I really like this Glacier Blue. It's not quite as cobalt as the color on the OnePlus 7 Pro, so it's a little lighter, but it's very similar. It has this really nice frosted texture on the back, and of course, the thing that sticks out right away is that circular triple camera module along the back, which incidentally seems to have an included screen protector already installed on the glass. That's also true of the display. They've always included a pre-installed screen protector. Below the phone, we'll find all of our accessories, and that includes a clear TPU-style case. So if you want a minimal case that shows off the color of the phone, one is included with your phone. It's too bad most manufacturers don't do this. I definitely like using these cases right out of the box so I don't scratch or damage the phone. And we also get a card with a SIM ejection tool. In terms of those warp charging accessories that OnePlus is known for, it looks like we get the exact same 30-watt power adapter and USB-A to USB-C cable included in the box. What is new is Warp Charge 30T, which is part of the battery architecture and the management software that has sped up performance of charging by 23%. So if it wasn't fast enough for you, it's even faster now. So with the 3800 mAh battery in the OnePlus 7T, you can charge it up to 70% in only half an hour. So that's a feature where this bests the OnePlus 7 Pro. But of course, you can expect this battery technology to make it to upgraded phones later. The screen on the 7T grew in size from 6.41 inches to 6.55 inches. They've also squared off the corners, shrunken the chin, and shrunken the teardrop notch at the top of the phone. So you get a better screen-to-body ratio than the 6T. The screen is also slightly taller, at 1080 by 2400 as opposed to 1080 by 2340. So that's still good for 402 pixels per inch. It is close in size to the OnePlus 7 Pro, but the 7 Pro still has a higher resolution screen. One feature it does pick up from the 7 Pro is the fluid AMOLED display. Essentially, that means we have a 90Hz refresh rate instead of the standard 60Hz refresh rate, which is common to all flagship smartphones. Very few phones have a 90Hz or 120Hz refresh rate like the iPad Pro. So with the higher frame rate, that means the interface of the 7T feels a little quicker and smoother than other smartphones. And that's especially nice with Android 10 running on this phone and that gesture-based UI, so you get very smooth actions with this interface. In terms of brightness, this gets up to about 1000 nits and supports DCI-P3, but new this generation is support for HDR10+. So video formatted in HDR10+ looks especially vivid on this display. OnePlus has also said they've added a new internal luminescent material to block 40% of blue light. So with this, they've been able to improve the low light comfort of the display so it's not quite as eye-searing. Very similar to the 7 Pro, this display does look brighter and more vibrant than the one on the 6T. Once again, we also have an in-screen optical fingerprint reader which uses light to read your fingerprint through the screen. We also have a face unlock feature which is extremely fast. In terms of the design, it's more similar to the 7 Pro than the 6T. So at the bottom edge, we have a USB-C port flanked on one side by a dual-sided nano SIM tray. That SIM tray is surrounded by a gasket to minimize water, although I don't think it has an IP rating. On the right side, just like all OnePlus devices, we get that 3-position alert slider just above the power button. And lastly, on the left side, we have our volume rocker. Despite the smaller notch, we still have room for a 16-megapixel camera with an f2.0 aperture, so that's a nice wide-angle lens. But just above that is a noticeably larger earpiece, which is part of the stereo speaker system. So that speaker is quite loud. That works with Dolby Atmos and the speaker at the bottom of the phone for nice immersive stereo sound. For the most part, it sounds really good, especially for a phone at this price. The only thing I would complain about is that at maximum volume, it does tend to distort a bit. Specs for the 7T are very similar to the 7 Pro. So we get the Adreno 855 7nm chip with the Adreno 640 GPU. This also gives us a pretty solid performance improvement over the 6T. We also get 128 gigs of storage standard. Some markets get 256 gigs. Now 120 gigs is pretty generous at this price, especially when phones that cost twice this much only offer 64 gigs standard. And that's pretty good UFS 3 2-lane storage, so it's nice and quick. We also get 8 gigs of LPDDR4X RAM standard, so no 6 gigs or 12 gigs, just 8 gigs, which is a pretty good base to start from. Battery size is up from 3700 mAh to 3800 mAh, so it's not quite up to the 4000 of the 7 Pro. In terms of this triple camera setup on the back, it appears to be based on the 7 Pro but improved in a few areas. Now, we seem to have the same wide-angle camera. This is a 48 megapixel Sony IMX586 sensor with an f1.6 aperture that's quite wide. Also includes optical image stabilization. But we get a new 12 megapixel telephoto camera with an f2.2 aperture. The ultra-wide camera appears to be the same with a 16 megapixel sensor and a 117 degree view. So it looks like only the main camera has optical image stabilization, but they also use electronic image stabilization to good effect. In fact, OnePlus is using something called a hybrid image stabilization system, or HIS, so that's able to combine both OIS and electronic image stabilization for the OnePlus 7T's cameras. So that's able to produce very smooth handheld video. Also new is a macro mode. This is a setting you can turn on for all 3 of the cameras. This allows you to be as close as 2.5 centimeters from your subject to take a close and clear shot. Overall, I think picture quality looks very similar to the 7 Plus. We have that flexibility of the wide-angle camera, which looks pretty good here. HDR is doing a pretty good job preserving detail, but it seems to bring down the highlights a little too much, so things tend to look a little darker than I would like to see. But for the most part, it's doing a very good job creating an image that doesn't look over-processed or softened. Where this camera really improves upon the 6T is nightscape mode. So of course, every camera now has some sort of night mode, and nightscape is OnePlus's implementation, and it's doing a pretty decent job here. Probably not as good as something like the Pixel or the iPhone 11, but it's much better than the 6T. We're getting much better image stabilization, so there's less blur. You're getting a lot more detail, so things look a lot sharper, and the colors look much better with the 7T. There are some features OnePlus will be adding via a software update, such as 4K video recording for the ultra-wide camera, as well as a 960 frames per second ultra slow motion mode. So next up, I'm going to take a look at OxygenOS 10 on top of Android 10. So we can use our fingerprint scanner here to unlock directly to the home screen, like so. Or you can use the face unlock feature as well. So as soon as you wake it up, it takes you directly to the home screen. It's extremely fast and generally what I prefer to use. So Android 10 has a gesture-based interface, but you can also go back to a navigation bar if you prefer. So in terms of the gesture-based interface, so let's go into an app here. So to get home, just swipe up, pretty familiar to an iPhone, or swipe up and hold to get to your recent apps, like so. We can also swipe left or right to go back. So you can use either the left side of the screen or the right side of the screen to do the same thing. So you can swipe down from the top or from the middle to get to your notifications and your quick setting toggles up top. And you can also swipe up to get to the app shelf. And again, a lot of this is customizable. So you have your search box up top. Now, if you long press, you can get to the home screen settings. So if we go to home settings, we have a few things to look at here. So you can disable a few things that seem to be on by default. So you can disable swipe down to get to quick settings, disable the shelf if you want. Double tap to lock was turned off by default. This allows you to basically tap anywhere on the home screen to lock it. And then, of course, you can wake up and get back to it really quickly. We also have 2 drawer options. So you can choose all apps, which is that traditional look here. So again, that's the app drawer, but you can also enable the search box instead. So again, if we turn this on, quick search, like so. So when you swipe up here, instead of getting the apps, you just get quick search. Generally, that's how I navigate apps anyway, but I'm definitely going to keep it into the standard view. We also have home screen layout, so you can change the spacing here or change the size of the icons. In terms of quick settings, there's a few things to take a look at here that are unique to the OnePlus. So we have a reading mode with 2 effects. We can choose the chromatic effect, and you can see how it dims the screen down to reduce the color. We can also use a different effect here, mono effect, which removes the color. There's also a built-in screen recorder. So you get this little widget that appears here with some settings that you can customize. You can change the resolution, the bitrate, number of frames, the audio source. So there's quite a bit going on in this little app. So you can start recording your screen, start navigating through the interface like so. Actually, because I'm recording it automatically grays that out here. So again, it's just pretty standard stuff. It's recording the microphone, recording the screen, and I can go back to that widget, pause it, and resume it later, or click stop and go to my gallery to view it. In terms of the recent apps viewer, this is where that smooth frame rate is especially noticeable when you swipe through these different apps. Of course, we have a clear all button. In the upper right corner, we have several options we can take a look at, including split screen. So if you want to open up 2 apps side by side, that's how you enable that feature. Next up, let's dig into the settings panel. There's always a few things to take a look at here. So under display, this is where you can customize the calibration of the display. So personally, I like advanced with AMOLED wide gamut. That gets you the most vivid display. May not be the most color accurate, but definitely is the best looking display. And you can change the temperature of that display as well. So you have lots of options. You can also change the refresh rate. So if you want to dial it back to 60 Hertz to maybe save some battery life, you can do that right here. We also have a video enhancer, which is turned off by default. Under status bar settings, this is where you can turn on the battery percentage indicator and display your network speed. We also have an icon manager. So if you want to turn off some of these icons, this is where you can manually turn each one off. Buttons and gestures has a few things to take a look at here. So this is where you can customize the behavior of the alert slider. Navigation bar and gestures is where you might want to customize your experience. So I've gone with navigation gestures, but you can also go to back home and recent navigation bar if you prefer. So that's a more classic interface. So if you turn that on, you also have some additional navigation options. So we have long press actions, double press actions, and all of these are assignable. But personally, I prefer the navigation gestures, and if you need a tutorial on how those work, there's a little one right here you can swipe through. You can also turn on the voice assistant right here. So when you long press the power key, this will take you directly to the Google Voice Assistant. We also have a bunch of quick gestures which seem to be turned off by default and haven't been set up just yet. I don't really use these, but you can use flip to mute. So if you have a phone call or alarm, just flip the phone over and that will mute them. You have a 3-finger screenshot, so you can swipe down to take a screenshot like so. You can also enable raise to answer and raise to switch. So as soon as you're receiving a phone call, if you raise it to your ear, it will automatically answer. Or if you're on a speaker and you want to go to your earpiece, again, just raise it to your ear. We have other things such as double tap to wake. We can use gestures for music control, and then we can draw a few characters and assign those characters to specific apps. So if you want to draw a 0 on your lock screen to open up the camera, you can do that. So let's go ahead and do that. Go to the lock screen, draw a 0. Launches the camera pretty quickly. So checking out this camera app, we can tap these icons to jump between our available cameras, so our ultra wide, wide, and our telephoto. You can also tap and hold to get to a dial, and you can smoothly transition between those lenses like so. It's pretty smooth overall, so as you can see, when it hits the detent for the next camera, you'll see it jump just slightly. Otherwise, it's pretty smooth. Now, something I'm noticing here is the haptic feedback as I move through these cameras. There's a new haptic motor in here, which is a lot more precise. It's very similar in terms of feel to the Pixel phones and the iPhones. It's pretty impressive. Another new feature is the macro mode. So you'll see this icon in the upper right corner. It looks like a flower. This allows you to turn this on and off. It's called Super Macro, and it does work with HDR. It also works with any of the cameras, it appears. So you can basically use this mode for any camera, and this allows you to take really close-up shots, and you have to be within 2.5 or 8 centimeters for the subject to be in focus. In terms of video, we have 1080p at 60 frames per second. We also have 4K at 30 frames per second, and then 4K at 60 frames per second. Now, something to keep in mind is that the ultra-wide camera is only available at 1080p at 30 frames per second. Anything above that, it disappears, and all you have is the telephoto and the wide angle. So in addition to video, photo, portrait, and nightscape mode, we have a few other modes we can swipe up to get access to, such as time-lapse, slow motion, panorama. We also have a Pro mode. So if you go to Pro, this gives you manual access to things such as your shutter speed, your white balance, your ISO, your focus depth, and your exposure settings. We also have a RAW mode. So if you want to save your files in RAW, you have that option. Now, because we have that ultra-wide camera, it looks like we get 2 different portrait modes. So we can use the telephoto lens for portrait or the wide-angle lens. Under the camera settings, you can actually customize the modes that appear on the splash screen for the camera app. So I can go to add more. So if I want to add the Pro mode, I can do that. Let's go back here, go back, and let's go back to the camera app to see if that was added. So if we swipe across the screen, you can see Pro mode is now available. And again, to get back to settings, just swipe up and go to the settings icon. We also have ultra-wide lens correction, so this will minimize some of the barrel distortion that comes with an ultra-wide lens. You have manual HDR control, which is turned off by default, so if you want to turn that on and off from the screen, you can do that. We also can enable or disable smart content detection, store location data, so if you want to turn that off. You can also turn off the shutter sound. You can also enable quick capture, so with quick capture, you just double press the power key to get to the camera app. So once again, OnePlus has done a fantastic job giving us the specs of a flagship phone without cutting corners, and plenty of features that other flagship phones that cost twice as much don't have. We have this very large and vivid OLED display, an in-screen fingerprint reader alongside facial recognition, and a triple camera system that you usually have to spend quite a bit more to get on other phones. Of course, we have other features that are a standout for OnePlus, including warp charging. There's always room for some improvement, so for example, there is no wireless charging or an IP rating. It would be nice to see some of those things. Alrighty guys, so that's going to do for me in this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please let me know with a like, and I'll see you again in my next video.